Hey folks, Tony Lee Glenn here today, and I've had a viewer ask me a question which I'm going to read off a computer screen here to my right. He says, how do you get the sound recorded on your videos? Do you use the built-in mic on your cameras? You don't use professional cameras, but get great footage every time. Can you take us through the video editing process that you get for such a result? Thanks. Real quickly, do I typically record with camcorder audio? Sometimes, I guess it depends on what am I trying to do and how good does it have to be. A lot of times I'm doing YouTube videos and I really don't care just, how incredibly great the sound is. I'm just there to capture a moment and whatever I think is kind of cool. So a lot of times when I'm out in the wild or whatever, I just use the camcorder audio. Most of the time, though, I do use a second microphone, which is just, I think you can see maybe this the top of the windscreen right here. I lifted it kind of purposefully in view today. What I use is this little guy here. It's a Zoom H2. And there have been updates to this. I think maybe the H3 is out, H2N, various different models. But these things are outstanding. And I usually record at a 256 kilobit per second MP3. Which sounds way better than anything that usually comes off the camcorder. Right now I'm using sort of a prosumer camcorder, the Canon HFG10 is what I'm using right now. That's what's shooting this. I'm shooting in 60 interlaced. Before I get into how I edit, I will go ahead and say a few things about things that I do to try to ensure that the video is good from the start. First of all, what's in my camera bag? Well, the HFG10 is awesome. I think it's up to the HFG30 now. Each one of these get a little bit better. They're really good with low light. If you go to camcorderinfo.com, I love going to that site, and they do very thorough reviews. And so this was one that a couple of years ago I really went and read all the reviews. I love the low light sensitivity of this camera, and really good performance it looked like. And they have, of course, improved it with the HFG 20 and 30. So this is kind of one of my main go-to cameras. At various times I'll use the HFS 100, which is a consumer camcorder. I bought these back when they cost about $900 a piece. Don't even think you can get them now. Very narrow field of view, but very excellent video, 24 megs per second. I used to shoot a lot in 30p, still shooting 30p, but I ended up getting a lot of just, as I moved and panned, I would get the rolling shutter type problem. So I started going to 60 interlaced a lot. And then exporting at progressive, which now, I'm going to get raked across the coals for saying this, but the purists will tell you never do something like that. And of course now we're getting ready to have a new kind of rash of 60p camcorders are getting ready to come out. There's going to be a slew of them coming out pretty soon. This is almost October 2013 as I'm saying this, but the HFS 100 was awesome. I then moved to the HFS 200. Which again, the Vixia, once again, these things used to be around $900, $1,000. The Canon, the HF G10, I think when I first bought it was maybe $1,300. So yeah, they're prosumer type camcorders. Some of them are high-end consumer. I try to always go with that. Now the camera that changed all that for me was the GoPro Hero 3, which I thought I had one with me. Yeah, the GoPro Hero 3 Black Edition sort of was the first time I decided to make the step into this kind of camera. And of course, all of you who've watched my reviews know how I feel about it. It shoots awesome video, and depending on how you treat the video, at what frame rate you shoot at, what field of view you shoot in, you're going to get some stuff that's really going to surprise you. The thing that I think is, I don't think you have to go for the pro level camcorders to get good video. I think it basically boils down to how's your lighting? Are you shooting with enough light? Are you shooting at a proper frame rate? And then what are you doing with the video once you go into your editing mode? Good lighting though, a lot of these camcorders will shoot almost in the dark, but don't push it. Anything you see that I've done and you think it looks good, it's because there was enough light there to start. That said, I'm not a person that thinks you have to have glaring lights on people all the time. Right now I'm shooting just available light under fluorescence and a little bit of incandescent here in my office. Stabilization, you can see here kind of some things I use. I use the Ravelli fluid head tripod. You've seen that maybe. I've got a review out here for this. This is awesome. It's heavy, but if you can use really good stability. Right now I'm on a Davis & Sanford tripod with the camera you're viewing this from. I love fluid head tripods, being able to move the video the right way. I've done reviews on both of these, the Manfrottos. This is the 561B HDV, which is a monopod sort of tripod type thing that really has fluid head on top. Love it. Shot some great video with it this weekend. Just started using it. I also use the Indie Jib camera crane, which I think is just great for the price. And then I use the Orbit Dolly, which you'll find at digitaljuice.com. So I think a lot of times whether a video turns out good, dramatic, from the get-go is how are you shooting it? Are you shooting the right frame rate? In other words, if something's coming at you fast, are you shooting at a higher frame rate? As I said with the Canons, I love the 60 interlaced. With the GoPro Hero 3, I love 48 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 1080p. If you want that video to be really special out of the GoPro, you'll shoot in ProTune mode, and you can bring the ProTune video natively into Premiere Pro, but if you want to really be great and give you a lot of extra options and a lot of really extra flexibility, you'll take it through the Cineform Studio and you'll convert to the high quality MOV or AVI video. It will like triple the size of your video, but it will also make it where you can do very subtle changes. When it comes to editing, I'm a Premiere Pro CC guy. I love it. I've used all Premiere Pro for forever. And generally when I bring a piece of video in, I look for three things. I look, is it bright enough? Is there enough contrast in it? Is there enough saturation in it? Does it need some color correction? And so I would say 90% of the time, maybe I'll say 80% of the time, I can bring a piece of video in, and if it's shot the right way, proper light, I mean just decent light, I can use fast color corrector and brightness contrast. Usually I pull brightness contrast on first and I edit my brightness and contrast. Then I do the fast color corrector. And if it leans a little bit too much toward the blue or to the red or the yellow, then I just pull the little selector the opposite direction, just slightly. I don't want to make the video look artificial. Then I apply saturation to the amount that it seems normal. So I don't want it to look oversaturated, I don't want it to look undersaturated, but I like for my video to pop a little bit. So almost every clip of video that I shoot, I do apply some color correction, saturation, brightness, contrast to. In Premiere Pro CC, the three-way color corrector is absolutely awesome. You can sit there and fiddle with that for 30 minutes on a clip till you find something you really like. That's why I probably don't use it as much as I ought to. I should master that, but you can go in and change shadow, you can change saturation, you can change color levels in the midtones, highlights, and shadows, and it looks fantastic. I also do, a lot of times if I've got deep shadows, since I do shoot in ProTune a lot, I use the shadow highlights effect somewhat in Adobe Premiere Pro CC, but I try to be subtle with it. I try to never use all of what it does by default when it goes on there. You can drag the shadow highlight on, and then you can tell it what percentage to actually apply to that, and I'll usually go 30 or 40%, not as much as it puts in there by default. So, that's kind of it. Other than the last thing, I guess, is exporting. And how do I export? Well, I always, pretty much for YouTube, I export at H.264. And really almost everything I do that anymore. The H.264 codec. And there are presets there. And what I try to do is, if it's going to be a 10-minute video, I try to get the most I possibly can out that meets the YouTube requirements. You can't go over 2 gigs, at least as of this recording, you can't go over 2 gigs on YouTube. So let's say I have a 10-minute video and I'm trying to get maybe 24 megs a second out of it with my encoding in H.264. There's places where you can go in there and you can change how many megs per second it is, but it'll give you an estimate as to how big that video will be. If it goes over 2 gigs, I know I can't do that. I'd have to back down to 16 megs per second or 20 megs per second, whatever it is, based on the amount of time that I've got. So what I'm going to do maybe separate videos on each of these things. I'm going to do a video on color correction, on the best way to export, in my opinion, on how I stabilize my video. I've got some of this out here already, but I think I'm going to do some this is going to be an overview video here that I'm talking about. How I marry the audio or match it up to the video. And I'm going to show you just kind of how I do my color correction and my brightness contrast, my shadow highlights type things. And there are 1,000 different ways that you can make video look great. And I'm not this huge expert. I have been doing nonlinear editing since 1997, so that's a pretty good while. But and I am a professional. I mean, when I'm doing something that's going to be a commercial for the hospitals, for instance, that I work for, then I spend a lot more time in it. I try to shoot it more carefully. But I tell you, you can go a long way in this world by just putting your camera into auto mode. Like right now, I've got it set in auto white balance. I could have metered the light. I could have done a lot of things. I could have held a card up and done white balance and all that. But there's a lot to be said in the real world for just putting your camera into auto and then going back and letting the software do the rest of the remaining tricks. And I would say that most of the time that's what I'm doing. I'm just out in the world shooting in almost full auto mode, auto white balance, unless I see a reason to go outside of that. And sometimes in very bright sunlight I will, or in very strangely lit rooms I'll go into a different mode. I don't do a whole lot of depth of field things, but when I do depth of field, then I'm going to use a DSLR with the special lenses on it where I can dial in the focus very precisely and have the background blurry. That's not what's going on here in this video. So yeah, I'll do some sub videos off of this video, but the main thing I would say take away from this video is be sure you got a good camera, be sure you got decent light, be sure you have a good NLE, nonlinear editing program. I know Vegas is great. I know Final Cut Pro, even iMovie, all these are very good. I'm a Premiere Pro guy just because that's what I'm used to. I like the way it tightly integrates with the rest of the Adobe suite. And then do subtle, careful color correcting. I love fast color corrector, and it won't take you long. It's very intuitive. So I'm going to do a video that shows how to do that. The fast color correcting, brightness contrast, shadow highlights, and maybe a few other things that you can do to spiff up video that's not quite there. And so hang tight, folks. There's going to be much more coming. And if you have any questions, I'm going to make this about a 1 or 2 week series. I'm going to take each of these various different topics that I've brought up here, and I'm going to address these, and I'll kind of string these all together into a playlist. And thanks for your compliment to the person who asked the question. I don't think my video looks great all the time. I can make it look great. It just basically boils down to just a little bit of time. I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on the YouTube videos, but the professional ones I do, I can really maybe take you a little bit farther down the rabbit hole and show you what I do when it comes to like red giant filters and a lot of maybe some special ones that I've created myself and some special approaches that I take toward the way that I shoot. So maybe we'll do a whole thing. This one will be based on just day-to-day YouTube, blogging, out in the world, interviews and things like that. And then I'll do one that'll be maybe a little bit more cinematic, but I'm not that guy. There are other people who do it way better than me. But again, thanks for the compliment, and hang tight, much more coming. Subscribe if you like, and I will be glad to answer anybody's questions as I have time to answer these questions. I love being able to go to YouTube and find out ways to improve my video. So hopefully I'm slightly in a little bit cool way helping you improve yours. Cheers to the world. Be good, peace, and we'll see you soon.